How's everyone this morning on this fine Pentecost Sunday? A lot of times people think of Pentecost as the first day in the Pentecost season, but it's really more the end of the Easter season, if you really want to think about it. And then that's why it used to be that what we now call days after Pentecost used to be days after Trinity. Next Sunday will be Trinity Sunday. And so Pentecost was seen as really belonging to Easter, completes the Easter cycle. Now that the Holy Spirit has been poured out, we are passing from one phase of the work of the kingdom to that phase which shall continue until Jesus comes again. Okay, wanted to continue our discussion and broaden it some regarding Judeo-Christian morality, where our culture is struggling, and how this will have to be changed if it's going to be changed, okay? And so this is by way of review. I've changed this a little bit, but it's the same basic thing. As we all know, you can't legislate morality, yes and no. You can't legislate to make things moral and to make people moral. What you want to do is legislate those things which people consider moral. Okay, so the laws should reflect the people's morality rather than trying to create it. So the regulation of human behavior, really what we're talking about, is most effectively done relying upon people's reputations. Okay? People want to do well. They want to have other people think well of them. They do not want people to think poorly of them. And that is a very powerful motivator. Shame means that people don't think well of you, either mildly or extremely. And if you don't want to be locking people up, the way to try to reduce certain kinds of behavior, I say shame. I don't mean by that necessarily cruel or intentionally hurtful. It can be. It can be, as we said last week, nothing more than your mother's quiet disapproval. It can be your own disapproval of yourself, okay? So it doesn't necessarily involve everybody standing around pointing and laughing at you. Although, on the playground, that certainly is one way that children regulate one another's behavior, often rather foolishly and often to their detriment. But nevertheless, that works. So there are things, there are behaviors, there are attitudes that we hold up, and there are attitudes that we look down on. And that's the basic idea of shame and honor. And people respond to shame and honor. The people to whom we respond to, whether they like or don't like what we do, are the people we care about most, and moving out from that. Typically family, friends, church, community, your circle, okay? And I put laws at the end because laws should reflect what people already believe, okay? And when laws reflect what people already believe, all they really are is a tool to try to deal with people who won't live by the law, okay? It's not really there to make us. It should reflect the people's values. It should, okay? Any thoughts on the whole concept of shame and honor in society? Because we don't talk this way.
But we do it.
We do it.
We do it because people are honored, especially in the media and all, whose morals are questionable at the very least. Good morals, or, seem to be an absence of good morals, but they're still honored. And our children see.
Listen, there are things, if you're a famous person, there are things that you can say that will get everybody clapping. And then there are things that you can say that will get everybody upset. For example, if you happen to be a kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs, okay, and I mean, you can do something this innocuous today. You are a Catholic, you go to a Catholic university, you give a speech to a bunch of graduates at a Catholic university reflecting basic, ancient, basic Catholic Christian ideas, then you are pilloried. Now, what's another name for having all these people cry out on social media about how bigoted and backward you are? What's another name for that? It's shaming, okay? It's shaming. Now, so we have morality in our culture today. The problem isn't that we have no morals. The problem is that there's been a profound change in what it is that we're going to honor and what it is that we're going to shame, okay? So, what's her favorite? Taylor Swift. I mean, there's somebody that our culture is, by and large, honoring, okay? I'm not sure why, but I mean, understand that aside from that, we have always had a tendency to honor people who are very good at singing or very good at acting. So we basically, that becomes sort of the American version of the English royalty. Right? We sort of make royalty of them. And so we honor them, and we honor them so much that we allow them to get up and talk about things they don't know anything about. Yes?
Until they say something else.
Well, and then it's an interesting thing what you have, because our kicker friend is not only being pilloried, there are also people who are coming to his side, okay? So what you have here is a profound division about what we ought to be honoring and what we ought to be shaming. And this is much starker than it used to be. I mean, you've always had divisions in society, but they were never this fundamental and this stark. And this is very fundamental and very stark. Can we honor marriage and childbearing as a thing that a person might want to do, even if they have a college degree? Are we allowed to say that even if you have a college degree, the most rewarding thing that you may do in your life will be your marriage and your children? Are we allowed to say that? Time was that was kind of, no, duh, right? But now that's a very controversial statement. What makes it controversial? What is it about it?
Because it's your choice.
Well, but you're not allowed to choose that. That's the funny thing, is that he is recommending a particular choice. Okay?
It's not you're not allowed to choose it. You're not allowed to express your belief in it. There's a difference. Because there's plenty of women that still think that is what they're going to do.
True.
But it's a man suggesting that. It's a man.
Well, but in fairness, men are half this equation here, so they do have something to say about it. And then also, he did talk about his own devotion to his wife and his kids. And so, you know, I didn't think that he was trying to exempt himself. I didn't hear anything in it that sounded to me like he was putting anybody down. What he was doing is he was holding something up that he thought should be exalted in society, and was holding that up for emulation. I mean, that's what it is. This is what you should aim for. This is a good thing. And even if you don't personally want to aim for it, it is a good thing. It is something, consider that, even if you don't want to do this, is it not a good thing that others do?
No.
Okay? So even if a particular woman doesn't want to have children, does that mean that she shouldn't, at any rate, honor those who do? I think as a society, we should honor people who make the sacrifices to have a family, even those who can't or those who don't wish to for some reason or another. Okay? And it's just stunning to me that something that simple cannot be put forward without, I won't say half the country because it's not half the country, but I mean it's a very loud group who feel perfectly comfortable in saying things that would have been checked into a home if they'd said that 30 years ago. Things have profoundly changed. What are we honoring as a society? Now, what we honor as a society now is people's ability freely to choose what they want to choose and to self-actualize. Okay? That's what we honor. So when somebody does something really weird, they're self-actualizing. When somebody does something traditional, they're conformists. We want people to do weird things because that shows that they are being themselves. And we're honoring this. And when you honor that, what do you get? More of it. We talked last week a little bit about transgenderism. And the question is, why all of a sudden has this become such a rage? I mean, what's in the water? And the answer is there's nothing in the water. Nothing has changed. And it isn't true that it's always been this way, but this segment of the population has always been repressed. No, it's just that we started to honor this and hold it up as ideal. You're courageous when you do this. Well, when you do that, what are you going to get? A lot more of it. All right. You cannot have a society where there is no shame and no honor. Okay, you just can't. Yes.
Well, now it's good. It's going back to the courageous part. It's going to come a time where people are going to stop coming out as transgender or bisexual, or like this changing of times. Because now it's not going. It's going to stop becoming courageous.
Oh yeah. It's just going to become weirder yet.
It's going to come. Oh. Well,
Yeah, we won't have enough letters in our alphabet to.
It's not going to become courageous, so they're not going to feel special.
Correct. That's right.
And so they're going to go, well.
They'll find something else.
I'm not. I guess I'm not transgender.
Yeah, well, there'll be some other weird thing. As long as we are, consider the difference
They need
between
to feel special.
encouraging people to adopt the mores and the traditions and their heritage, the difference between that and the idea of everybody has to be themselves. I mean, true to yourself, whatever that is. And that is mean conforming to your heritage, conforming to society, is then the opposite of honored. It now is looked down on. Okay, it's a mild shaming if a man is wearing a suit and tie everywhere he goes, because why, that's you're such a conformist. So what you have is well, okay. Let's tell you what. We've talked about marriage and family. We're not going to talk a lot more about this, I don't think, unless you all want to. But if you think about, as a society, you're not going to pass laws to change any of this. It isn't going to work. What you need to do is to have people, if enough people honor certain things and don't honor certain other things, it just gets a lot easier for society to regulate itself. If you look at the top with the things that, in a traditional Judeo-Christian society, we would honor chastity and marriage and fidelity to spouse and family. It's what we're going to honor. Childbearing and child-rearing, masculinity, femininity. We are going to honor those things, okay? We're not going to say every single person has to do all of these things, but we are going to say these things are good. They are, and the people who do them and do them well should be honored, and the practice of them should be honored. And when you look at the shame, again, shame can be anywhere from we're going to lock you up and throw away the key to, okay, any kind of sexuality outside of marriage. No, we're about to celebrate. What are we about to celebrate this coming month? It's a wonderful 30-day celebration. It's Pride Month. Now, what does that mean, Pride Month? Are we not being told to exalt and honor these things? But those things fit nowhere up in what I've got under honor. And they all fit down here under various things. Why would we want to honor those things? What did they do for us?
Right.
I want you to think about another thing too, the difference between personal fulfillment as the goal of morality or the flourishing of the community generally. One is based on duty and one is based on self-fulfillment. If your morality is based on self-fulfillment, then you're not, if you look at what I'm talking about in honoring up there, those are all things that require massive amounts of duty and may or may not bring fulfillment and will not bring fulfillment at various points in time, okay? Sometimes it will be very unfulfilling to be getting up in the middle of the night with a crying child. That is not necessarily fulfilling every moment of every day. But it requires duty every moment of every day. So for society to flourish, for all of us to flourish together, it is necessary that we all have a morality based upon our duties to do what we're supposed to do rather than a duty to be happy. I'm just using happiness as a shorthand for sort of the emotional well-being. Our society is trying to move to a morality based upon individual well-being and happiness, and that is a real problem for the society at large. I mean, if you take an absurd example, if we exalted my right to drive whatever speed and whichever lane I want, okay, if that becomes the, if we're going to honor people who have the bravery of driving on the left side of the road, who are courageous enough to go 110 miles per hour, even though they know that that's very, very dangerous, but they have courage. If we're going to honor things like that, I'm going to stop driving. I'm going to stop getting near roads. We just won't be able to have them. Now, that's an absurd example because it's sort of self-correcting. This other stuff is self-correcting too, but it self-corrects over many generations. Okay? It doesn't happen quickly. And so while we're experimenting with the sexual revolution, we are destroying generations of children and families. And eventually we may figure out that this is a disaster, but by the time we do, it's just not such a quick and easy thing as, gee, if I drive down the wrong side of the road, this is going to be bad. Okay, one last comment. Why is it that anybody, if they want, can get online and get access to pornography absolutely free and as much as you want? Why? Supposing I were to ask you, should that be illegal, what would you say? Okay? All right, so it doesn't reflect society's views, and since it doesn't reflect society's views, it should not be illegal. Okay? Should society's views be different? And if it were, should we get rid of this? Could we?
No.
I want you to think about this. We can't get rid of it 100%, of course. Can we get rid of 90% of it?
Only if society changes.
Well, if society changes. Now let's think about this too. What does society think about pornography? We know they use it, but what do they think about it?
It's good, it's healthy.
Some say that. However, a lot of people are coming to different conclusions. A lot of people who politically you would think that person should favor this, and there's a lot of people on the left and the right who are not taking the traditional, oh, that goes against the Bible. They are looking at this and saying, this is wreaking havoc on family and marriage and young men and old men. It's just wreaking havoc. And you don't have to be a religious person to see what this is doing. Okay?
They view it as dirty, but in seems simple, but yet very addictive. And it doesn't matter where you come from, whether you're a churchgoer or whether
Yes, it's very harmful.
you're somebody who doesn't believe in Christ.
Mhm.
You know, you're gonna watch.
So,
So, but yet,
could we not, though, as a society say, well, okay, let's go back. 50 years ago, do you think that society was in favor of this? Okay, then why did it become legal then?
The Supreme Court.
But why would the Supreme Court say that?
it's two consenting adults back when.
What do you think the highest principle is here?
Liberty.
Liberty. People should be able to watch what they want to watch.
Amen.
Okay? Is that true? As a moral principle, people should be able to watch what they want to watch.
Amen.
The answer is no. Okay? Because we're sinful. That means we sometimes want to watch and do things that are not good for us. So, again, in the Judeo-Christian mindset, we don't say liberty is the number one thing. Let me put it to you another way. Is there such a thing as a right to do wrong? Okay?
It was a freedom to do it.
It's kind of like, you know, them allowing people to murder people on camera. You know what I mean? Like, if they were to allow such horrific graphics to actually be filmed, there's going to be more people to want to go out.
Right. And the question is, why do we want this poison? If it's poison, if we all agree, yes.
So, is one aspect of this freedom of speech? And that if we...
That's how it was defended.
If we block the freedom of speech from one group, then they can block our speech.
Okay, it's often argued that way, but then get the picture here. If what we're saying is we can't block any speech no matter what, even something like this, then what is going to rule in the public square? The lowest common denominator. Whoever wants to be loudest and grossest. We can't stop. Okay, because the theory is, well, if you try to stop my pornography now, then I might try to stop your Shakespeare later. Well, that's a non sequitur. It's not like you're saying, okay, can society not decide this kind of stuff is useful, this kind of stuff is not? Now, there may be lots of things where we're going to say, okay, well, you know, Shakespeare is one thing, but some of these dime novels aren't worth very much. But can't we come to some kind of general agreement that at some point the social value of some speech is not worth the poison it brings? We're not talking about political speech. We're just talking about people's right to say what they want. Now, I think that when our society made the choice that freedom of speech is, in the Constitution, freedom of speech was political speech. And it was necessary so that we could govern ourselves. We have got to be able to have conversations where you cannot be censured for your political views because we've got to be able to govern ourselves. You can't censor the very people who are doing the governing. That's where the freedom of speech in the Constitution came from. That's where that comes from our legal past. It was not the right to say whatever you want and have everybody hear it. Society does have a right to say, you may not have a t-shirt with that word on it and walk around town. Should we not have that right? But if you're going to say, well, no, that is an infringement upon speech. So what I'm pointing out to you here is that you cannot make freedom and liberty the number one thing, the sine qua non. If you don't have freedom, you don't have anything. People talk that way sometimes. If you don't have freedom, you don't have anything. Well, total freedom is total chaos. Now, forget again whether we're talking about laws. I'm talking about shame. I'm talking about if I walk outside with a t-shirt on that says thus and so, nobody's going to talk to me. I won't be able to get a job because people won't want to know me. because this is the kind of thing I say publicly. There's no law. I'm not going to be put in jail. Although if it's bad enough, and everybody thinks that I ought to be put in jail, then maybe there would be a law that says if you do that, you're going to jail. Yes?
See, but having this pornography actually opens the door for these pedophiles.
Well, it's just you're making the point that there are many, many bad and deleterious things that come to our society because of this.
Because the pedophiles, they want to prey on these young people, but yet they're not getting fulfilled on the normal age, whatever they're doing. And so they want to, branch off onto these young people. But now they're making all these snuff, not even snuff films, but films with these young, that's why we have such
Well, and then also,
underage.
there are very few people that will publicly acknowledge that they watch this, which obviously an awful lot do. Okay? So then the question is, do you support this or not? It is entirely possible for a person to say, I do not support it at all, yet I watch it. Is that possible? Yes. People do things like that all the time. Save me from myself. Okay. Let's move on. Let's talk about economics for a little bit. At a very basic level. Economics, okay? Human flourishing, we've already talked about, because life is sacred. Life requires protection from the very beginning all the way to the very end. And the acts that create life and all of this, so this is how we built up this whole idea of the Judeo-Christian understanding of sex, marriage, family, and so on, okay? It's because life is sacred, and therefore all these things are sacred and are meant to protect it. Now here's another thing we're going to say about human life. It is sacred, and it needs a lot of things. It needs a lot of things from a lot of people. We just do not exist on our own. It turns out that money doesn't grow on trees. For human beings to flourish, well, I was listening to a podcast that was talking about what would happen if it was talking about an electromagnetic pulse that would just wipe out electronics in the United States, just wipe it out. And it was going through just a little bit, the implications of that. And the implications of that were so astonishing. And, everything would be broken, and there would be no means to fix it. So we are now going to go back 300 years on how we're going to live. And then the question was put, can this nation, this block of land, support 330 million people on the technology of 300 years ago? It's almost going to kill almost everybody. There will be some who will survive, and they will survive okay. That makes a very excellent point. What it is necessary to keep you and me alive, an awful lot. And for human life to flourish, okay? We need things. Christian moral economic order includes the poor and the disadvantaged. It doesn't favor them. Sometimes people act like it favors them, like it's a good thing to be poor. And the scripture doesn't speak of being poor as a good thing. It does speak of God being the God of the widow and the orphan and the fatherless and the protector of the oppressed. Yes, God does come to the aid of these people, but not because he favors them. It's because they need the help. And no one else will help them.
And conversely, the rich man can't get into heaven, just like a camel can't go through the eye of a needle.
Right. So the thing is, there are problems with being rich, but many of the great saints were quite wealthy. David was very wealthy, and Abraham. So it's not like wealth is and poverty is not a benefit. But as far as our morality, who gets what? Okay. The law and the economics, we don't want to say God favors the poor and the oppressed, but he doesn't exclude them either. So we need all of us to take care of everybody. Remember the people in the boat. Everybody, okay? Not just the 4 who are most likely to survive and pitch the other one. We have to take care of everybody as best we can, okay? So that's a basic principle. Here's another basic principle. It's our duty. Each and every one of us, it's our duty to contribute what?
Time, treasure, talent.
What we are able, right? Some of us can contribute more than others. So let's think about this a little bit. Should there be such a thing as retirement? Yes, if you mean I no longer have to work for a paycheck. No, if you mean I'm going to spend the rest of my life on the golf course. Okay? No. Should children work?
In some ways, yes.
Yeah. Children should contribute. How old do they need to be before they can start contributing? The moment they're able to do anything, they should be expected to do whatever they can do. Should sick people contribute? Yes. Healthy people should contribute. Skilled people should contribute. People with all kinds of trouble should contribute. Who doesn't have to contribute?
Politicians.
Dead people. Okay? If you're dead, you don't have to contribute anymore. Presumably there'll be another system in your new world. So we all have a duty to contribute. Now notice I put contribute. I could have said work. But what I really mean is contribute. And what that generally means is work. But one person's work is maybe not for another person. And it can be different ways that we are able to contribute. But nobody, what does the 7th commandment, okay? The 7th commandment gives the opposite of this principle. Stealing. Okay? When you steal, what are you doing?
Anti-contributing.
You're not only not contributing, you're actually taking from others who are. Okay? So it's the opposite. It's sort of like the opposite of valuing life is murdering. We're going to see here in a little bit the opposite of truthfulness, okay, in the proper use of is to lie under oath in court against your neighbor. Okay? So to steal is sort of by definition, you are a parasite. But there are other ways to be a parasite. You can just be lazy. You can refuse to contribute. Let's think about this person. It's a fictional person. Well, maybe not. Here, let's think what we think. What we think about this individual. He says, I'm healthy, capable, and I don't want to be a drain on society. So what I'm going to do is I am going to take care of myself. I'm going to work just enough to take care of myself. I am not going to go on the public dole. I'm not going to steal. I'm going to make just enough to take care of myself. I'm going to pass through this life taking nothing from society, but adding nothing to it either. I'm just going to pass through inertly. What do we say about that person? Do we like that? Should that person be morally exalted? Should we shame them? Should we say, well, you know, each to each his own? You're not hurting anybody?
I would say it's shameful to live that way.
Why?
You're rooted in the
You're not hurting anybody,
They could do more,
but you're not hurting anybody.
but you're not helping. You have a duty.
Okay. Exactly. Often the arguments you'll hear, moral arguments, are, I'm not hurting anybody. Okay, but the Judeo-Christian moral mindset is not don't hurt people. It's obvious that you're not supposed to hurt people. Yes. But you have a duty. And here we have a duty to contribute. Okay? That is what we can. So here we have a person who could do more and doesn't. Who gets hurt because of that?
The rest of society.
Yeah, the rest of society. Can you see it? No, not necessarily, but that doesn't matter. The fact is, we can't approve that. We can't approve somebody who could and doesn't. Now here's somebody right next to them. It's all they can do just to make enough to get by. And so they do what they can. and it's just barely enough to get by. But they don't, there's nothing extra. What do we think about that?
No shame there.
Should be no shame. In fact, there should be just as much honor on that person as the person who contributes 10 times what they actually consume. Because remember the widow? Puts 2 pennies in, okay? And Jesus praises her. So there are those among us, the average healthy adult human being can produce much more than they need. Okay? My proof of that is the nation we live in. Okay? We all have a lot more than we need. And that's because, on average, all of us produce well more than what we actually consume throughout our lives. Okay? And the extra that we produce ends up redounding to the benefit of others. Our families first, okay? And then the communities in which we live, including the nation as a whole. We make the world a better place. We don't just take care of ourselves, or even just ourselves and our own. Okay? We have a duty to contribute according to our ability. We have a duty to support those who cannot support themselves. Now think of the difference between, I have a right to your money, and I have an obligation to take care of you. Okay? We all have a duty to take care of those who cannot take care of themselves fully. Okay? So to the extent that they can't take care of themselves. What is the duty of a person who can't take care of themselves? It's the same as everybody else, right? Do what you can. Just because you can't do as much as somebody else, there is honor in work, and we all have to do our share. And your share might not be a very big one, but as long as you're doing your share best you can, then what more can we ask? But that means that if I have more than I need, okay, do I have a right to keep it all for myself and ignore that other person? I have a duty to support that other person to the extent that I'm able. Now, I realize this raises a whole lot of questions like, how are you going to, I'm just talking in theory now. In theory, it may be that another person doesn't have a right to take my money, but I may have a duty to provide it. And it's not necessarily money. It might be help in any kind of ways, okay? So the idea here is that those who have more and are able to have more because they're just able to produce more have a duty to lift up those who cannot do enough. And we all have a duty to do what we can all the time. Okay? Do we see that? So we should honor things like this, okay? Like work and industry and diligence and thrift and generosity and taking care of your own family, for example, community mindedness, these sorts of things, and we could sit and think about more of them, okay? These are things that we ought to honor people who do what they can. And if it's a lot, great. To whom much is given, much also is required, okay? So that's a good thing, and it redounds to the benefit of all of us. But there is not only dignity in work, but a duty and a requirement to work. See, it turns out, if you just, when I began this conversation, I said human beings need lots of things to flourish. The things that we need to flourish don't grow on trees. They don't just land in our laps. They have to be produced. How are they produced? What is the word we use to produce the things we need? Work or labor. I mean, that's the way it is. It's not necessarily digging a ditch, but it is working. And society has no, I mean, to say that I don't have a right to spend my money on what I want, believe it or not, morally speaking, okay? That a person who just spends his money on himself and only himself, we should look down on that person. And the person who is very generous, we should emulate and exalt. And everybody should do what they can, okay? From the smallest child to the oldest among us, to the sick, the healthy, male, female, whatever your situation and station in life is, we ought to shame indolence, theft, parasitism, greed, stinginess, extravagance, wastefulness that hurts us all. In the law, I have a right if I want. Probably not anymore, but the classic expression is what I own I can do with what I want. Okay, so if I own it, then I can put it in a big pile and light it on fire if I like. Okay? But that's the law. The law doesn't require me to help my neighbor. Did you know that? I am not required to do anything good for my neighbor.
You are required to pay taxes.
I'm required to pay taxes. That's right. Others will do good for me. I am forbidden to hurt my neighbor. I can't set fire to their house. But if their house catches fire, I have no legal obligation to risk my life or even interrupt my television program to save my neighbor. You realize that? Now, of course, you would be greatly shamed if, in order to finish my television program, that family burnt up. In fact, we would honor me tremendously if I risked life and limb to save somebody else, especially if it was somebody I didn't even know. I mean, we want to honor those kinds of people, those kinds of selfless acts. Okay. Now, how are we going to solve the problem of more and more and more and more people being more and more and more dependent on government subsidy, if you consider that to be a problem? Is it a problem that there are government subsidies for people who need it? No. I think everybody would agree quickly. People who need it should get it. That's part of our duty to provide for people who cannot provide for themselves.
Whether it's through government or through...
Well, you're going to have an argument about the most efficient way to do it. Okay, all that's reasonable. I mean, you can decide, should this be done privately or through the government? But morally, it's 6 in one, half dozen in the other. You have an obligation to do it. Okay? As a society, you are not a good society if you just let people starve. I don't care how you fix that problem, but you have a duty to do that. And it doesn't matter how rich your society is. If your society is very poor, you're always going to have some that are poorer, and you have to take care of everybody if it's possible, okay? To the best of your ability. When welfare programs first began, there was a tremendous resistance to using them by the very people that needed them. Why?
Shame.
They felt shame. Why?
Because they had...
Because they felt like they should be working. And they wanted to work. But times being what they were, there simply weren't enough jobs. So some people who could work and wanted to work for money couldn't work. And so we devised a system where you could get food and money. But this was very shameful. But what would eventually overcome the shame? Hunger. I mean, if you just had to. If your family is starving, you're going to go get in line. Okay? And you may not like it. Now, do we put this very gently? We don't want people who need it to feel ashamed to get it. Okay? We really don't. But is there a role that a certain amount of shame plays in our sinful world to prevent people from taking advantage? And that's where the problem is. It's because we're broken. How much easier life would be, and how much easier it would be to take care of poor people if we could rely on everybody to be honest.
You wouldn't have panhandlers who are using it for...
You wouldn't have panhandlers. You wouldn't have people that are taking advantage of Social Security or disability or all the many, many ways that people do. And it would be so easy, and we wouldn't have COVID checks going out and finding out that, half of it is going to people that, right, it wasn't intended for. It'd be really easy. We just say, come and get the money that you need, and you know who you are and you know what you need. But people won't do that, okay? What happens if you start to take away any kind of stigma to being on the welfare? If you take any stigma away from it?
More and more people
Well, you may, and why? You say, well, that's not necessarily the case. I say, well, it wouldn't be the case if we were all the way we were supposed to be. But we're not. We tend to take advantage when we can. So that's a problem, because if you make it very easy and don't have any stigma. Now, the reason why I'm very uncomfortable is because it's very easy to start stigmatizing people you don't want to stigmatize. Remember, I have a duty to help the person who's doing what they can and can't do enough. I have a duty to do that. It's not just a nice thing that I can do if I want. God orders me. I may not just overlook the need of my neighbor. Now, my neighbor has got to take care of themselves as best they can, but I may not just overlook that. Okay? So there should be no shame in that whatsoever. Unfortunately, the way our society is, if you say to 100 people, 10 of which actually need this, here there's no shame in it, come and get it, you're going to have 30 that are kind of going to come and get it. And it's almost impossible to figure out. I mean, you'll figure out 5 of them, you'll know for sure, you're good. Okay? And there's going to be 10 that are going to be kind of a gray area. You're just not going to know. And because you're trying to figure it out, how's that going to make people feel? Shame. Because you're asking them questions. You're trying to figure this out. We have more and more and more people who are relying more and more on money divorced from work. And I don't know what public policy, what law you're going to pass to change this unless the attitudes of people change. Now you can say, all right, one attitude, one way of shaming that is for all the rest of us who have jobs to look down on people who don't or don't have good enough jobs so that when they go to get their government check, we make them feel terrible. That's one way. Okay. Another way is that each of us should inculcate within ourselves a healthy sense of the value of work so that we know that we're working if we can. There's a lot of people in our society who do not feel this, who really, in their attitude is more, I am owed these things. That is a real problem. If we don't want to be shaming people who are legitimately trying to help themselves, we're not trying to shame them, of course. We're trying to shame these others, but we're ended up shaming everybody. If we don't want that, then we have to inculcate in children growing up and in adults as well the value and the duty to take care of yourself to the best of your ability. And then, if you still need help, then there should be no shame in that. Okay? And we should shame people whose attitude is, the world owes me something. Okay? We should shame that. Remember, shame is a very broad term. I don't necessarily mean, public humiliation, but society should look down and raise our children to be proud when they work hard and to be ashamed of themselves when they're lazy or when they're relying upon handouts. Because what is that? You could do more, but you don't. Who are you robbing? Everybody else. Okay. All right. What time is that? Okay, it's about time to stop. Any questions on this? It's a delicate topic because, you know what I think? I think about 80% of our nation would be of the same mind that we want to help people who need help. I've never met these people that I'm sometimes accused of being a part of who just doesn't care about the poor. I've never met them. I've never met people who don't care about the poor. We all want to help. The challenges are how? What's the best way? And how tightly should we try to control this situation so that we don't all go bankrupt? Okay? And it's a challenge because of human nature being the way it is. But it does begin with an individual sense of my duty to do what I can. And if I can count on you to do what you can, I will not begrudge you if it's not enough. Okay? But then you need to count on me if I can do more than I can, right, to be generous with what I don't need. And that's the only way this is going to work. Yeah.
Find in government that encourages you to be lazy and
Well-
sit at home and make more money than if you went to.
Sure, there's all kinds of ways in which our public policy is askew at a very fundamental level. And where we're just not thinking this through. Some of it is just normal government inefficiencies, unintended consequences and things like that. But some of it is they're just not really thinking through I've always thought, and I realize the trouble in requiring work for welfare, the trouble being how do you administrate it, but conceptually it's like, well, of course you would require that. In fact, if I was the one getting the welfare, I would expect that. I don't want to just be given something and do nothing. I don't want that. Now, it's very complicated how we're going to do this, how we're going to, but having trouble knowing what to do is a totally different thing than having not a clue what you're supposed to do and what we're trying to do, right? The Judeo-Christian concept regarding work and regarding all of our requirement to do what we can for the benefit of us all is very fundamental. And when we see ourselves adopting positions that run that overlook that or ignore that, we've got a problem, no matter what the policy is that you actually adopt. Okay, well, let's pray. Lord Jesus, you've given to us each talents and abilities, and you yourself have said, to whom much is given, much also is required. Help us, Lord, to whom much is given, to give much, to work hard and to do what we can, not only for ourselves, but for the world in which we live. And for those, O Lord, who are struggling at various times, either with health or age or just inability, Lord, grant to them the pride and to be able to work and contribute what they can, and help us all, O Lord, together to help our neighbor to flourish. Amen.